You know, as an instrument-rated pilot, keeping current and staying sharp with your instrument skills is even more important than it is for a VFR-only pilot. After all, I'd hate to share the skies with instrument pilots who are grossly out of practice, especially if those pilots happen to be me, myself, and I. So let's take a look at what's legally required to act as pilot in command in IFR flight. Well, within the preceding 6 calendar months, you must have performed and logged 6 instrument approaches, holding procedures, and interception and tracking of courses using a navigation system. Now notice, there is no mention of instrument flight time required. That's because there isn't any time requirement. Now, no specific kind of approach is required either. Any kind of instrument approach will do. The key is that you should be able to flip through the last 6 calendar months in your logbook and find 6 approaches in there. Now, you need this recent experience in each category of aircraft in which you want to fly instruments. You cannot mix and match categories. For instance, instrument work done in a helicopter does not count towards instrument currency in an airplane. By the way, this can all be done in a simulator, which replicates a specific type of aircraft, or it can be done in a flight training device, which replicates a generic aircraft in that category. Now, if you find it difficult to meet these instrument currency requirements in your everyday flying, you can always develop your own training plan to stay current. For instance, you could fly an instrument approach using radar vectors to get the final, and that would cover intercepting and tracking of navigation courses. Then you could fly the missed approach to a holding pattern, and then you've got holding taken care of. Now, these 2 things, along with any 6 approaches in a 6-month period, will keep you current. Although most instrument-rated pilots feel it's far better to fly more than just this minimum amount. And it's not a good idea to fly the same approach over and over again. That wouldn't be much of a challenge, so plan to fly different kinds of approaches and get as much experience as you can. You'll actually increase your instrument skills that way and have a lot more fun. Now, of course, if you fly these approaches in VFR conditions using a view-limiting device, you will need a safety pilot. You know, someone who's there to keep you from running into something solid in the sky. Well, your safety pilot must have at least a private pilot certificate and be qualified in the category and class of aircraft you'll be flying. Now, it means, for instance, that a single-engine pilot cannot fly as a safety pilot in a twin. It also means that if a pilot is rated only in multi-engine airplanes, that's rare, but it does happen, that pilot cannot act as a safety pilot in a single-engine airplane. Now, the safety pilot, by the way, needs a current medical certificate, but is not required to be current in the aircraft, although it would probably be a good idea. Now, since the regulations do require the presence of a safety pilot, that person is a required crew member, even in your single pilot Skyhawk. And that means you can both legally log that time. Well, all right, folks, that's how you stay current. But let's suppose that you slip up and you are no longer current. What will you do? What will you do? Well, if you're still within 6 months of your last month of currency, here's what you will do. You'll just go out and fly until you meet these requirements. Now, what you need to do is find a qualified instructor or a safety pilot, and then jump into your trusty Skyhawk and fly enough approaches to total 6 in the last 6 months. And of course, do intercepting and tracking and some holding, and bingo, you're current again. Or if you prefer, you can fly all this in a simulator or flight training device with an instrument instructor. Now, you can even combine actual flight with a simulator as long as you come up with logbook entries totaling the magic 6 approaches in 6 months. But what if you let your instrument currency lapse beyond the 6-month grace period? Well, then the requirements change. The FAA says that you must pass an instrument proficiency check consisting of a number of tasks required by the instrument rating practical test. Now, to find out what you have to do on your instrument proficiency check, take a look at your Instrument Practical Test Standards book on the Rating Task Table page and look under the column PC, which stands for Proficiency Check. Now, Any instrument flight instructor can give you an instrument proficiency check, and once you have the endorsement in your logbook, you're current for the next 6 months. Now, whether you're maintaining or regaining your currency or taking an instrument proficiency check, you can do it in one or a combination of the following. You can do it in an aircraft, a simulator, or a flight training device. Now, anytime you use a simulator or flight training device, you must have an authorized instructor present instead of just a safety pilot. But you can still save a lot of money over the cost of an airplane because you can get a lot done in a short period of time. Plus, an instructor can often detect problems that a safety pilot may not be aware of, or he can offer tips to help you be more organized and in control. Now, here is the bad news. Personal computer-based aviation training devices, in other words PCATDs, do not qualify as simulators. Now, PCATDs can be used when you're training for an instrument rating, but not for instrument currency. Now, let's talk about where and how you log your instrument time. You may log instrument time only when you're operating the aircraft solely by reference to instruments. That kind of makes sense, doesn't it? Now, this could be while you're using a view limiting device, in which case you would log simulated instrument time, or in IMC, where you would log the time as actual instrument time. And of course, you can even log the time you spend in the simulator or using a flight training device, and you'd log that in a separate column in your logbook. Now, when you're logging your flights to show that you have met the requirements for instrument currency, you must also enter the location and the kind of each approach you fly, and the name of your safety pilot if you needed one. And that's it. Everything you need personally to be legal in instrument flight. But remember, meeting the FAA minimums to be legal doesn't necessarily mean that you're proficient. So fly IFR, whether actual or simulated, as often as you can, and practice a variety of instrument approaches. That way you'll know that sharing the skies with that ever-present trio, me, myself, and I, will be safe.